This is the Power Break Podcast number 055, an interview with Stan McMahan, a pastor and church planter. Hi, I'm your host, Bob Brubaker, inviting you to stay tuned as we seek to give you a little power in this break to help you succeed in the race of life. The Power Break Podcast is a twice-weekly show that provides a discussion of biblical principles applied to daily life and an interview show featuring stories of perseverance to encourage you to keep pressing on. Today we're talking with Stan McMahan, who will be taking us through the stages of church planting in Mulberry, Florida. Most people don't realize all a church planter goes through to effectively plant a church, so I know you'll enjoy this interview with Stan McMahan and his story of Greater Hope Church in Mulberry, Florida. This interview took place at the office of Greater Hope Church, so let's go to the interview. So Stan, tell us about how you started to become a church planter.
Thank you,
Where
Bob.
did that come from?
Yeah, so that's actually kind of a long story. I'll try to be as brief as I can about it, but
That's all right. We've got plenty of time.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, I grew up here in Mulberry, Florida, where I am now, and I guess the shortest way to tell the story is from the time I became a Christian, which was right around, I guess, 8 or 9 years old. I almost immediately felt a sense of calling to ministry. Mm-hmm. And at that time, it was missions. That was what I thought it was going to be. I grew up kind of in that church culture where they bring missionaries in all the time, which is great. And you hear these wonderful stories of adventures and telling people about Jesus halfway around the world. And for a guy that grew up in a small town and kind of in the country, that was exciting. And that idea of getting away. And so I pursued that really all the way through college. I was a minor in Japanese and learned how to speak Japanese and read and write Japanese at Florida State. And he went to Japan a couple times during the college years. One time was there for like a semester of coursework in Tokyo, and really thought, my wife and I both thought we were going to become missionaries in Japan. And what happened is we got settled into life after college. We came back home to Central Florida, to Polk County, and got involved at Trinity Presbyterian Church with Tim Rice back in those days. And he helped us over a long time to see that missions is not just something that happens around the world, but it's something that happens here. And I know that doesn't sound very revolutionary maybe to a lot of people, but it was revolutionary to me. Having grown up here, I just didn't think that Polk County doesn't need missionaries, right? Missionaries are needed in places like Japan. So over time, Tim's vision for that really captured me, and Stacy and I, my wife and I, decided to stick around here. And we even at that point didn't think we were going to plant a church. We thought we were just going to kind of be in ministry, associate pastor, maybe one day be a senior pastor at a church. But one morning while we were on vacation at the beach over your way, Bob, or closer to you, on the Gulf Coast, I'm not going to say I had a vision, because I don't want it to sound too mystical. It wasn't that mystical, but it was sort of like I had in my mind's eye, imagined planting a new church in my hometown of Mulberry, and what I imagined attracted me. I liked the thought, and didn't tell anybody for months. Just prayed about it, talked to people in and around Mulberry, but never told them why. I was just asking questions, trying to figure out, is this something God's calling us to do? And about 6 months after that vacation, I asked my wife, or actually said to my wife, I've got something to tell you that you're not going to like. I think God might be calling us to plant a church in Mulberry. And to my surprise, she said, me too.
Really?
And we had never talked about it. In fact, every time I had ever mentioned church planting, she was like a very hard no. Like, there's no way. It's too difficult. It's just, we would be better in a settled church environment. But at that time, for whatever reason, God had prepared her heart and mind to say yes to that, and we began that process, which took us through church planting assessment and fundraising and all the various things we had to do. And about 2 years ago, almost, we launched Greater Hope Church in Mulberry. It's we meet in the high school where Stacy and I started dating.
My goodness.
When we were in 10th grade. So yeah.
That's a great story. Let's back up. When you were you on staff at Trinity Pres?
I was.
When
yes.
you had this impression about Mulberry?
I was, yeah. So I taught school for several years at Mulberry High School and at a school called Lakeland Christian School, which is a pretty big Christian school in Lakeland, which is the town just north of Mulberry. And after I kind of transitioned from that after seminary, because I worked at the school all the way through seminary, and came on staff at Trinity with Tim, and was on staff for several years, and was the associate pastor there whenever I felt that call or that impression to plant. And Tim Rice is a definite encourager and champion of church planting, and so it was not anything that he didn't already kind of want and expect from me. I think if anything, he felt like he had probably pushed or encouraged me too much to church plant, and was trying to back off of it a little bit by the time I said, I think that's what God's calling me to do.
So how did he take the thought of Mulberry?
Yeah, I think Tim understood it for sure right from the beginning. Not everybody did, certainly not everybody. So some people definitely thought it was not the best idea, just because Mulberry is a small town. And, frankly, it's not the place that a lot of people think, let's go invest a whole bunch of effort and money and time into. I think that's a sad, way of thinking, but I think there are a lot of people who have that thought process. Tim didn't, though. I mean, he believed in it from the beginning. All together here in our local area, we have this vision that we call Renew Polk, which is a vision that several churches have to see many churches planted all throughout Polk County to renew it with the gospel. And we all kind of knew that if we were going to do that, we were going to have to go to places like Mulberry, because Mulberry is kind of what Polk County is. Outside of Lakeland, all the rest of Polk County is this, and so it was good to get back here to the hometown and do small town ministry.
What were the challenges when you were fundraising? You mentioned about people might think that Mulberry. Why Mulberry?
Well, thankfully, God lined up enough people who didn't think that way.
Well, that's good.
who had a desire to support church planting. So, the fundraising was very easy, and I don't think it was because I'm a great fundraiser. I think it's just people were eager to see the gospel expand in Central Florida and in Polk County. So, didn't have a lot of trouble there. In fact, a lot of those folks that at first were doubtful or balking at the idea of planting in Mulberry did come around. I mean, there's very few that
that's good.
that still think it's a bad idea. I think a lot of people who know about it now see this is needed, and God loves all kinds of places, and the fact is God has already been at work in Mulberry. I mean, before we came here, it's definitely true that we didn't begin the work of God here. In a sense, we're just sort of joining in a new partner in this work that was already going on. In fact, I came to Christ here at a church not very far from where we're sitting right now. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Stan, one of the things I always see, a church planter has to develop a love for the community where they're planting the church. It seems like God gave you an opportunity with the love that you already had for the community, right?
He did, yeah. So I didn't have to do a whole lot to develop that. It already was there. Even though growing up here, you think you're going to leave and not come back, just because I think that's just the small town rural mentality. It's just, if you're going to make it, quote unquote, you got to make it out and
in the big city,
in the city, even if that's Lakeland, even if that's the big city, quote unquote, you got to get out to make it. And even though I felt that way, I never hated Mulberry. I always loved it. I was very proud to be from here. I always have been, and love Mulberry's people. love the fact. I mean, Mulberry is unique, I think, in some ways as a small town, because it's got always new people. It's pretty transient for a small town, and so I actually love the fact that new people are always coming in, and people are also always leaving, which is sad, but
right.
There's always new people here coming together, and it's an opportunity, I think, for the gospel. Yeah.
Let's back up to you have been church planting now for how long?
So probably 3 years from when we started 3.5 years from when we started the process.
Okay.
2 years from when the church actually began.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how close are you to particularization?
I think we would be able to particularize within the next year or so.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. God has really blessed us with some folks that some of them were in what we called our core team, which was the original group that helped us start the church. Some of those folks were really strong Christians, and leadership qualities abound in that group. But even some folks that have come in the 2 years since we started, I think, are really good potential leaders.
We'd like to talk about perseverance on this podcast, and you have persevered through the steps of church planting, and you're seeing the fruition now.
Yeah.
How many were you having in attendance recently?
Yeah, I mean we've been between the 100 and 125 mark.
That's wonderful.
Very consistently. I mean, the summer it took a little dive. There's a joke among church planters, and I'm sure all pastors can identify with this. The summer, you kind of you definitely kind of hit the valley for sure in terms of attendance. But yeah, we've been climbing since we started, and we're now very, very easily in that low hundreds range on Sunday morning.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Walk me through the steps that you had to go through to plant a church.
Wow, yeah, there's a lot of steps.
I know. So you went through your assessment, and you were on board with Trinity Pres, and then they
That's right.
backed you up, right? And so
they did, yeah. So they were very supportive. Trinity was. So there was a period of time there where I was transitioning from my role as associate pastor to church planter. Church planting apprentice is what they called it there. So for a period of time there, I was sort of passing off my duties to other people, kind of making sure that role as associate pastor was taken care of, and then beginning to assume the role of apprentice. And went to assessment before that, and then once I became apprentice, I immediately started to raise money. I started to make contacts in the community, and this time telling people what we were doing and planning to do. And actually some of those earliest contacts have become very fruitful. I mean, in terms of members at our church, and even doorways into the community. Even though I'm from here, that didn't mean that I knew every single person, or it didn't mean that I had all the connections that I needed to to find like an office or things like that. So some of those early contacts were really instrumental in helping us get going. After that, Stacy and I moved back down here. We weren't living that far away. We were living up in Lakeland when we were at Trinity. So we sold that house and bought a house very close to where we're sitting right now, right in the middle of the city of Mulberry. And our kids go to school here now, and so we've moved kind of our whole life to here. That was a major step in that first year, and then after that, I started trying to make contacts in businesses in Mulberry, and I went to go to the Chamber of Commerce regularly, and at the schools, I'm involved with Fellowship of Christian Athletes at schools and mentoring and things like that. So that just trying to meet more people and create as many opportunities as possible to tell people about Jesus. Those are the main steps. And then you got to rent your spaces. You got to have a space to worship. You got to have some kind of office, or even if it's your house, you got to have somewhere to work and meet people. And so we went through all that. For the first while, we didn't have an office. So I worked out of my house and out of just like McDonald's and Hardee's and things like that. But now we do have this office space that we're sitting in now, and it's a great asset for the ministry. So
that's wonderful. So
yeah.
You met with a core group, and then you were building that.
Okay, so that's good. Yeah. So we spent probably 6 to 7 months, maybe even 8 months, meeting just as a core team, and we met at a person's house who lives down this way, or actually a couple different people's homes, and we would sing together, we would pray together, each time I would talk to them about what church planting is for and what the gospel is, and how to share your faith, and what kind of church we were wanting to be. So kind of the mission and vision of the whole project. We spent a lot of time talking about that, probably beat a lot of dead horses in that, but I was really trying to make sure that everybody was on the same page, and the excitement just grew and grew. I mean, by the time we started services sooner than we had thought, because people were just so eager to get started and to invite people after that core group development phase that we ended up starting several months prior to when we thought.
Wow, you scared about that?
A little bit, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think by the time we started, I was ready too, but definitely, there was a lot of anxiety about it. Because if you look into like church planting training and church planting literature, one of the things they often say is launching too soon can be one of the most fatal things. So it gets in your head, and you think, is this too soon or not? It's always hard, almost impossible to tell. I think we did it at just the right time.
How many did you have when you launched?
Well, in the core team, we probably had about 60 people.
Wow.
And that included some people that we picked up along the way, So when the first day we started, the first service, we probably had 60 to 70 committed people.
Wow.
Now on that, we had a bigger group that came because we had a lot of well-wishers and a few new people that have stuck that came from that first service. So we had a really big first service. It was like 160 people.
Mercy.
But we knew that wasn't going to be like the for real number, because we just had a lot of people that knew us and wanted to support, but they had other churches that they were committed to. We had about 60 or 70 committed, and like I said, now we've got the last list that I looked at, we have about 160 that regularly come to Greater Hope. Now we don't often get all those people on the same Sunday. But
the unwritten rule is that on a given Sunday you have 2/3 of your congregation there, but you don't have the same 2/3.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah. That's exactly what we're seeing, and but God has really blessed us with new folks.
That's great, Stan. What are some of the highlights that you look at as a church planter? I know that, you have ups and downs, but what are some of the ups that you really kind of have to focus on and say, look what God is doing?
Absolutely, yeah. So, yesterday at our service, we had new members and baptisms. Mm-hmm. And I think times like that are where God encourages you. Especially yesterday, we had one young lady, a friend, who was baptized, had never been baptized before, and was professing faith in Christ, and has been going to our church 5 or 6 months, and that was a really great testimony
to
wonderful. What God is doing. And then another person was baptized yesterday the same way, profession of faith. This was a kid, but an older kid, but was ready to profess faith. And when he first started coming with his mom to Greater Hope, he wasn't anywhere near there. So that's great. It was just encouraging. And we've had several of those new member baptism Sundays to encourage us. I think also seeing new people rise up into leadership or just ministry, just people that weren't using their gifts for Jesus who now are. That's exciting to me.
Yeah.
whether they were going to church before or not. Some were, some weren't, but a lot of the people that we have weren't, even if they were in church, weren't as active. Some were, but a lot weren't, and now they're like on the first string.
Wow.
And out there just really pouring out their gifts and resources for the kingdom, and that's exciting. I think that's why you church plant, not just to get those who aren't in church in. That's the number one goal, but number two would be getting people who are already in church involved in local ministry in a more hands-on way.
Sure.
So
now you meet at a high school. You meet at the
Mulberry
High School.
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of challenges does that bring? I mean, you have to set up and tear down every week, and
we do. Yeah.
And so that requires a lot of manpower.
It does. Yeah, we have a great group of volunteers that rotate through those duties. We have to. Thankfully, we're in the auditorium, so we don't have to set up any chairs.
Oh.
It's just theater seating throughout the auditorium, a very large building. And so all we have to set up is the stage. So we got to set up our sound equipment and things like that. And then we have to set up our kids area, And we also have refreshment area and things like that. But overall, compared to some church plants, our setup is not as bad because of the chair situation, but it's still a lot of work. I mean, we get every Sunday our crews are there at 7:30 a.m. getting ready.
How many does this involve?
Yes, setup every week involves probably a total of 6 to 8 people a week.
Oh, okay.
The setup. Now we have volunteers who do other things, to get Sunday done, but for setup itself, 6 to 8 a week, and they kind of rotate through. The members of the band, music team, and the AV team are also usually always there to kind of, because they're the experts in the sound system and the musical instruments and all those things. But
you mean Stan doesn't oversee that?
Not at all. No. Thankfully, I have not had to oversee the music or the AV really from day one.
What a blessing!
It's a huge blessing. Yeah. We have some great musicians and some really talented tech people that really put together the audio visual support for the worship service.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Greater Hope. Mm-hmm. Where did you come up with a name like that? That's a wonderful name.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, I have to give my wife credit. She came up with the name.
Way to go, Stacy.
Stacy came up with the name. Shout out to her. No, from when we were at assessment, actually, the PCA's assessment center, one of our assessors, a dear pastor friend in another state, said to us that he said the one word that comes to mind when I hear your story and your heart to plant is the word hope.
Really?
Because he just said it seems like that's the driving thing, that you've seen a need, you've seen people around you, kind of in your own native, stomping grounds, who are struggling right at the moment with hope, and you're going to bring the message of Christ, the good news of the gospel, which is the greatest hope. And so we started thinking, well, how can we put the word hope in our name? And Stacy came up with Greater Hope.
Greater Hope. So, that's great.
Yeah.
Stan, I know that not everything is perfect as a church planter.
No.
How do you make it through the times when you're struggling?
Wow, yeah, I mean, that's, in some ways I have an answer, in other ways I'm searching for an answer to that every day, but I think number one, and I don't just mean it as a cliche, but truly prayer.
Right.
And by that I mean not just like intercessory prayer, but I do mean that, but also spending time with God, just as a friend, as a father. That has helped me.
Oh, sure.
I actually don't think I would be able to do it. I know I would not be able to do it without that. Mm-hmm. And so I've tried from when we started to take at least a block of time every week I like to pray out loud, and that helps me focus and
Sure.
And also just helps me realize that God really is there. He's present. So I speak out loud to God as much as I can. And so I like to get out to the many nature trails that are around Mulberry and just pray as I walk. And I try to do that every week. And those are the times that I've really been able to unburden my heart when I need to and remind myself of who God is and what He's up to. That's number one. And then, just having good relationship with my wife and family. We have 4 kids, so it's home is busy as well as church, and so us having that good, solid marriage relationship and having friends, all of that is really helpful.
Stan, it's been a pleasure to have you on our podcast to hear the insights of Greater Hope Presbyterian Church.
Yes, sir.
I reckon you're still called a mission, aren't you?
Yes, we're still a mission church, not particularized yet. We don't, our name is just Greater Hope Church, but yes, we are definitely a mission church of the Presbyterian Church in America. I'm proud of it. Very, very thankful for it. Yeah.
Well, we're very thankful as a member of the same presbytery that you're in. It's always a joy to hear your reports and to see firsthand what is going on here in Mulberry. So thank you, Stan, for joining us today. By the way, do you have a website for the church?
I do, yeah. I would love for people to go check it out. It's kind of a long address, but greaterhopemulberry.org.
Okay. We'll have the link in our show notes.
Awesome.
So people can find it there. And Stan, thanks so much for joining us on the Power Break podcast today.
Thank you, Bob.
This has been the Power Break podcast with another story of perseverance to encourage you to keep pressing on in the race of life. We trust you've been inspired by this story of church planting with Stan McMahan and his story of planting Greater Hope Church in Mulberry. If you'd like information about Greater Hope Church, their website is greaterhopemulberry.org. That's all one word, greaterhopemulberry.org. We'll have the link in our show notes. Today's show is number 055. The Power Break podcast is a twice-weekly show that provides a discussion with JT and myself on biblical principles to help you succeed in the race of life, and an interview show with stories of perseverance. Please subscribe wherever you have downloaded the podcast, and please leave us a rating and a review. Check out today's show notes, books, the Power Break blog, and more at my website, bobbrubaker.com. And listen next time for the Power Break podcast.